Do you truly believe you understand Jethro Tull? I mean, really, honestly believe you have the measure of this band? You've certainly heard Aqualung on every classic rock radio station from Cleveland to Melbourne until your ears have bled. You've seen the iconic wild-eyed image of the grizzled codger balanced precariously on one leg, flute in hand, and you've probably tapped your foot to Locomotive Breath in some dimly lit pub. And you think that's the band? That's the sum of their contribution? To believe that is akin to claiming a complete understanding of the vast, terrifying, and complex machinery of the cosmos because you've glanced at a child's drawing of the sun. It is a comfortable, a convenient, a commercially sanitized, and an utterly, fundamentally false picture. The Jethro Tull that has been curated and sold to the masses for 50 years is a caricature, a simplistic and digestible shorthand for a band that was, in reality, one of the most musically audacious, lyrically savage, and compositionally labyrinthine units to ever emerge from the British Isles. The authentic Jethro Tull, the band of substance and fire, lies buried beneath decades of commercial compromise, lazy journalism, and the sheer indifference of the casual listener. It is hidden in plain sight, tucked away on the B-sides, the deep album tracks, and the sprawling epics that timid radio programmers wouldn't touch with a barge pole. The unvarnished truth is that the very songs which define the essence of this band, their restless, relentless innovation, their staggering instrumental prowess, their deeply cynical and unflinching worldview, are songs you have almost certainly never even heard of. So the question remains, and I demand you answer it with brutal honesty. Are you content with the childish drawing, or are you finally ready to stare into the blinding, complex heart of the sun itself? Because that is where the real treasure, the real art, the real untamed music resides. We are not here to paddle in the lukewarm shallows of familiarity. We are here to plunge into the crushing, exhilarating depths of a catalog so rich, so varied, so challenging that it makes the output of most of their celebrated contemporaries look like the work of one-trick ponies. Forget everything you think you know. The real lesson begins now. Let us be brutally clear from the outset. The perennial dismissal of Jethro Tull by so-called rock purists and the critical establishment has always stemmed from a fundamental misunderstanding, a colossal failure of imagination and musical intellect. They were never a straightforward rock band. They were never a straightforward folk band. And they were most certainly not a blues band, much to the profound and lasting chagrin of the dogmatic London scene from which they clawed their way out in the late 1960s. Ian Anderson, the band's perpetual leader, resident provocateur, and fiercely autocratic creative engine, was a startling anomaly. He possessed none of the preening, phallic arrogance of a Robert Plant or the boorish swagger of a Roger Daltrey. He was wiry, fiercely intelligent, unapologetically cantankerous, and he wielded a flute, an instrument universally associated with pastoral whimsy and classical recital halls, like a cudgel, a piercing weapon against complacency. This profound cognitive dissonance was the very nucleus of Tull's unique genius, and the primary reason they remained so stubbornly, frustratingly misunderstood. Their music was a constant, glorious war of contradictions. Heartbreaking acoustic tenderness clashing with ferocious, bone-jarring electric riffs, fiendishly complex, odd-meter time signatures masquerading as simple, rustic folk tunes, and lyrics that were at once deeply, painfully personal, and universally scathingly critical of the human condition. To begin to appreciate this, we must first journey back to the very beginning, to a track that perfectly encapsulates their raw, embryonic, and defiant power, a piece that announced their snarling arrival and served as a blistering statement of intent, a song for Jeffrey from their 1968 debut album, This Was. Before Martin Barre's iconic searing Les Paul sound would come to define the band's heavier, more sophisticated side, there was Mick Abrahams, a phenomenal blues guitarist steeped in the tradition of Eric Clapton and Peter Green. This Was is an album quite literally torn between two futures, a sonic battlefield for the band's soul. On one side was Abraham's deeply held desire to remain firmly rooted in the fertile soil of the British blues boom. On the other was Anderson's burgeoning, eclectic, and wildly unpredictable vision. A Song for Jeffrey is the precise moment where Anderson's vision wins the first decisive battle. The track is not built on a conventional guitar riff, a move that was in itself a heresy in 1968. It is constructed upon a hypnotic, chromatically descending bass line from the criminally underrated Glenn Cornick, a line that feels simultaneously ancient, like a medieval dance of death, and menacingly modern. It's a simple, repetitive ostinato in D minor, but it is the granite foundation upon which the entire glorious, chaotic structure is built. And then comes the flute. This is not the clean, pure classical flute of the conservatory. This is a guttural, percussive, and blues-inflected howl, ripped straight from the gut. Anderson, treating the instrument less like a woodwind and more like a blues harmonica, employs aggressive overblowing techniques to create sharp, harmonic squeals, and uses his own voice in a sort of rough, growling unison with the flute melody. A highly unorthodox technique he would refine and perfect over the subsequent years. It is raw, it is visceral, and it sounds like nothing else from that period. Clive Bunker's drumming is a masterclass in jazz-inflected rock propulsion. He isn't merely keeping time, he is engaged in a dynamic, fiery dialogue with the other instruments, his intricate ride cymbal patterns and explosive snare fills adding a layer of nervous, crackling energy that relentlessly propels the track forward. Abraham's guitar is certainly present, but its role is subverted. It is textural, a distorted, fuzzy, and angry counterpoint to the flute's dominance, rather than the central melodic voice. Lyrically, the song is a cryptic, impressionistic portrait of Jeffrey Hammond, a childhood friend of Anderson's from Blackpool who would, in a strange twist of fate, later join the band as its bassist, despite having barely played the instrument. The words are a collage of bizarre images, painting a picture of an eccentric character with eyes in the back of his head, a man who wakes in the morning, buys a paper, reads the headlines, goes to bed. It's this potent combination of a primal, repetitive groove, a revolutionary and aggressive approach to a non-rock instrument, and enigmatic observational lyrics that set the stage for everything that was to come. It was a clear, unambiguous declaration of intent. We are not just another derivative blues band. We are something else entirely. Something stranger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. The departure of Mick Abrahams immediately following that first album was, without question, the most pivotal and beneficial event in the band's early history. It was a necessary life-saving amputation. Abrahams was a brilliant purist, but purism, by its very nature, is the sworn enemy of progress and innovation. His exit, though acrimonious, ripped the blues rock security blanket away from the band and paved the way for the arrival of Martin Barre, a guitarist who was emphatically not a bluesman at heart. Barre was a melodist, a texturalist, a harmonic colorist, and a riff writer of extraordinary and unique talent. His particular genius lay in his innate ability to serve the song, to weave his intricate, often lyrical guitar lines around Anderson's increasingly complex acoustic frameworks and virtuosic flute melodies. He was the perfect foil, a musician of immense taste and restraint who knew precisely when to unleash hellfire and when to lay back and color the sonic canvas. His arrival on the phenomenal 1969 album Stand Up marked the true genesis of the classic Tull sound. While that album is justly celebrated for its audacious diversity, from the Bach-inspired Barre to the heavy rock of Nothing Is Easy, one of its most compelling and consistently overlooked tracks reveals the band's rapidly growing fascination with narrative, atmosphere, and complex arrangement. For Michael Collins, Jeffrey, and me, this is not a rock song in any conventional sense. It is a miniature sonic film, a 3.5-minute meditation on solitude and perspective. The title itself is a dead giveaway, a direct reference to the Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins, the loneliest man in history, who orbited the moon alone in the command module, while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took humanity's first steps on its surface. The song is a profound and poignant exploration of isolation, observation, and the bittersweet feeling of being a part of something historic, yet simultaneously separate from it. Musically, the piece is an absolute marvel of dynamic control and subtle orchestration. It opens with Anderson's gentle, finger-picked acoustic guitar in a standard tuning, playing a chord progression that hovers ambiguously between A minor and C major, masterfully creating a sense of weightlessness, of floating, of being untethered in the void. Anderson's vocal melody is melancholic and deeply reflective, his delivery intimate and personal. Martin Barre's contribution here is subtle, but absolutely crucial. He plays a clean, arpeggiated electric guitar figure, likely on a Fender Stratocaster, that shadows the acoustic, adding a crystalline, almost ethereal shimmer to the sound. But it is the band's arrangement that truly elevates the track to a work of art. The first verse is deliberately sparse, just Anderson's voice and the interwoven guitars. Then, as the narrative shifts to the turning earth below, the rhythm section enters with breathtaking subtlety. Clive Bunker's drumming is beautifully understated. He uses brushes on the snare to create a soft, shuffling pulse that mimics the gentle hum of the spacecraft. Glenn Cornick's bass provides a simple, melodic anchor, never overplaying, always serving the song's fragile mood. The masterstroke, however, comes in the instrumental bridge. Here, the song shifts dynamically into a more urgent, almost frantic feel. Barre introduces a slightly overdriven guitar line, his notes bending and soaring, and Anderson's flute finally enters, not with a furious bluesy solo, but with a mournful lyrical melody that perfectly captures the complex emotions of the lone astronaut, a mixture of awe, loneliness, and duty. The song is a powerful testament to the band's growing confidence and sophistication in the studio. They were learning to use dynamics, texture, and instrumentation to tell a story, to create a palpable atmosphere, to evoke a specific emotional response. It is a quantum leap from the raw blues of their debut, and a clear signpost pointing directly towards the sprawling conceptual masterworks that lay just over the horizon. It demonstrates a compositional maturity and an artistic ambition that was simply light years beyond most of their hard-rocking contemporaries at the time. As the band stormed into the 1970s, their musical palette and their ambition continued to expand at an astonishing rate. The album Benefit, released in 1970, is often unfairly viewed as a mere transitional record, a simple bridge between the folk rock intricacies of stand-up and the hard rock masterpiece of Aqualung. This is a lazy and inaccurate assessment. Benefit is a darker, denser, and more cynical album, reflecting the grueling realities of constant touring, and it contains some of Martin Barre's heaviest, most inventive, and most rhythmically complex guitar work. A prime example of this, and a song criminally ignored by casual listeners and classic rock radio alike, is the ferocious Nothing to Say. This is Jethro Tull, at their most aggressive and rhythmically adventurous. The song is propelled by a monster of a guitar riff, a jagged, syncopated, and utterly unforgettable figure in E minor. Barre's tone is thick, menacing, and saturated, achieved by cranking his Gibson Les Paul through a powerful high-watt amplifier. The brilliance of the riff lies in its rhythmic instability. It is not in a standard, predictable 4/4 time signature. It alternates between bars of 4/4 and 7/8, creating a lurching, off-kilter, and deliberately unsettling feel that prevents the listener from ever getting comfortable. This is not simple, mindless, head-banging rock. This is music that demands your full attention, that forces you to engage with its rhythmic intricacies, that challenges your very sense of a stable beat. Anderson's vocal delivery is equally aggressive, almost snarling, as he spits out vitriolic lyrics about apathy, alienation, and the complete breakdown of meaningful communication in a world saturated with empty words. The rhythm section is locked into this complex groove, with a machine-like precision that is staggering. This is also one of the first albums to prominently feature John Evan on keyboards, and his contribution, while not yet at the forefront of the mix as it would be on later albums, is vital. He adds dense layers of Hammond organ that swell and recede, adding a sense of gothic drama and harmonic richness to the proceedings. The flute solo in Nothing to Say is not a whimsical folk melody. It's a frantic, breathless, and desperate flurry of notes, full of sharp trills and angry staccato bursts, perfectly mirroring the anxiety and frustration of the lyrics. The song is a brutal, complex, and immensely powerful piece of progressive hard rock. It demonstrates, unequivocally, that Jethro Tull could out-heavy almost any band of the era, but they would always do it on their own fiercely intellectual terms, with a flagrant refusal to bow to the simplistic conventions of the 4/4 rock and roll straitjacket. It's a track that showcases their sheer musical muscle, a quality often overlooked by those who only know their more delicate acoustic side. Following the unexpected commercial behemoth that was Aqualung and the audacious conceptual monolith of Thick as a Brick, a single song spanning 2 sides of vinyl, the band could have easily and justifiably rested on their laurels. They had achieved both critical and commercial success on a massive scale. Instead, with a perversity that would become their trademark, they veered into even more complex, dense, and theatrical territory with 1973's A Passion Play, an album so bewilderingly intricate that it was savaged by critics upon its release. But it was the album that followed this critical mauling, 1975's Minstrel in the Gallery, that saw them perfectly synthesize all their disparate influences, folk, hard rock, classical, and theater, into a cohesive and staggeringly powerful whole. The album's title track, Minstrel in the Gallery, is arguably one of the greatest and most definitive compositions in the entire Jethro Tull catalog, a multi-part 8-minute suite that encapsulates every single thing the band did well. It is a song of 2 distinct warring halves, a profound study in acoustic intimacy and volcanic electric fury. The opening section is a breathtaking solo performance by Anderson on his custom-built, small-bodied Martin acoustic guitar. The playing is astonishingly intricate and percussive, employing a dizzying array of hammer-ons, pull-offs, and a rhythmic slapping of the strings against the fretboard that turns the guitar into a self-contained orchestra. The chord progression is complex and harmonically sophisticated, moving through a series of minor and suspended chords that create a palpable feeling of medieval melancholy and cloistered introspection. Lyrically, it is one of Anderson's most personal, venomous, and self-lacerating pieces, a bitter reflection on the profound loneliness of the performer, the minstrel on the gallery, observed, judged, and ultimately consumed by a faceless, demanding crowd. The vocal is delivered in a confidential, almost whispered tone, drawing the listener into the intimate, claustrophobic space of the song. Then, at precisely the 2:10 mark, all hell breaks loose. A single, thunderous, distorted A major power chord from Martin Barre shatters the acoustic tranquility like a wrecking ball through a stained glass window, and the full band crashes in with a force that is utterly breathtaking. The second half of the song is a relentless, ferocious hard rock assault. Barrymore Barlow, who had replaced Clive Bunker on drums 2 albums prior, proves himself to be a drummer of immense power, precision, and technical virtuosity. His playing is incredibly busy but always musical, his explosive fills and complex cymbal work driving the track with terrifying intensity. The late Jeffrey Hammond's bass line is not a simple root note plod. It is a driving, melodic, and contrapuntal counterpoint to Barre's riffing, a song within a song. Barre himself delivers what is arguably his most iconic and perfectly constructed solo, a masterpiece of phrasing, melody, and dramatic tension that builds in intensity before a spectacular, staircase descent down the fretboard that is both technically dazzling and emotionally devastating. The entire section is propelled by a palpable sense of righteous anger, a musical explosion that perfectly mirrors the lyrical frustration and resentment of the song's opening. As if this weren't enough, the song then transitions seamlessly into a beautiful, heartbreakingly sad string quintet section, arranged by the band's secret weapon, D. Palmer, which provides a moment of cinematic grandeur and reflection before the final, furious rock conclusion. Minstrel in the Gallery is Jethro Tull in microcosm, the sensitive folk troubadour and the snarling rock god, the introspective poet and the spitting cynic, all existing within a single, brilliantly constructed and emotionally draining epic. It is a demanding, challenging piece of music, but its rewards are immense. It is the sound of a band at the absolute zenith of its compositional and instrumental powers, channeling their anger and frustration into a work of breathtaking art. While Minstrel in the Gallery showcased the band's continued mastery of the acoustic electric dynamic, It was the folk rock trilogy of albums, Songs from the Wood, 1977, Heavy Horses, 1978, and Stormwatch, 1979, that saw Anderson fully and joyfully embrace his deep fascination with British folklore, pagan traditions, pastoral life, and the cyclical changing of the seasons. This was a deliberate and calculated pivot away from the introspective, often bitter cynicism of the previous albums, and towards a more celebratory, if at times deeply melancholic worldview. From the magnificent Songs from the Wood, a track that perfectly illustrates this new and vibrant direction is the astonishingly clever The Whistler. On the surface, it's a jaunty, infectious, and seemingly straightforward folk tune, driven by Anderson's intricately layered acoustic guitars, and, of course, a prominent virtuosic tin whistle melody that dances and weaves throughout the song. But lurking just beneath that highly accessible and cheerful surface lies a veritable labyrinth of rhythmic complexity. The main verse section is written and performed in a fiendishly tricky 5/4 time signature, but it is played with such a light, effortless, and infectious groove by the rhythm section that you might not even notice its mathematical oddness. The chorus then shifts seamlessly and logically into a more standard, driving 4/4, providing a sense of cathartic release and a catchy sing-along quality that is impossible to resist. This unique ability to make profoundly complex rhythms sound utterly natural and effortless is a defining hallmark of the band's unparalleled musicianship. The arrangement of The Whistler is a dense, multi-layered tapestry of sound. D. Palmer's string and brass arrangements, which by this point were an integral part of the Tull sound, are not mere sweetening or background texture. They are integral contrapuntal parts of the composition, providing elegant counter-melodies and rich harmonic depth. John Evans' keyboard work is a model of taste and subtlety, using Hammond organ, grand piano, and the wonderfully archaic portative pipe organ to add splashes of color and texture. Martin Barre's electric guitar is used sparingly but with surgical precision, providing short, sharp, stabbing riffs that punctuate the acoustic framework and add a welcome touch of rock and roll muscle. The song is a perfect example of the band operating as a true, cohesive ensemble, with every single member contributing a vital and irreplaceable part to the intricate, interlocking whole. Lyrically, it's a piece of pure, unadulterated folk storytelling, a charming tale of a magical, Pan-like musician who can summon the seasons and charm the animals with his otherworldly tunes. The multi-part vocal harmonies, a feature that became much more prominent in this era of the band's history, are lush, complex, and beautifully arranged, adding a touch of Renaissance-era madrigal music to the proceedings. The Whistler is a masterclass in progressive folk. It is intellectually stimulating in its complex construction, but emotionally direct and joyful in its impact. It is living proof that music can be both profoundly complex and deliriously fun, both technically brilliant and infectiously melodic. It represents a joyful, confident, and creatively rejuvenated Jethro Tull, a band that had found a deep new wellspring of inspiration in the ancient myths, forgotten traditions, and timeless landscapes of their own homeland. The follow-up album, 1978's Heavy Horses, continued the pastoral themes of its predecessor, but with a distinctly more somber, epic, and elegiac tone. The title track, Heavy Horses, is a majestic, 9-minute ode to the disappearing working draft horses of Britain, the Shires, the Clydesdales, the Suffolk Punches, a powerful and deeply moving statement about the relentless erosion of tradition in the face of so-called modernization. The song begins with a gentle, intricate finger-picked acoustic guitar pattern played in dadgad tuning, an open, resonant tuning often used in Celtic and British folk music that creates a rich, drone-like quality. Anderson's voice is warm, empathetic, and filled with a profound sense of loss as he sings of the ironclad dinosaur and the dying breed of gentle giants. The song builds with masterful patience, slowly and deliberately. The first entrance of the rhythm section is beautifully restrained, with the brilliant Barrymore Barlow using felt mallets on his toms to create a soft, rumbling, earthy pulse. D. Palmer's magnificent string arrangement enters, playing a beautiful, mournful, and quintessentially English melody that evokes the rolling green hills of the countryside. The song gradually gains momentum and power, with Martin Barre introducing a clean, melodic electric guitar line that weaves in and out of the vocal phrases with exquisite taste. The midpoint of the song features a stunning, multi-part instrumental section where the band's rock and folk sensibilities merge into a perfect, seamless whole. It starts with a beautiful and authentic-sounding violin solo, played by session musician Daryl Way of Curved Air, that has the fiery spirit of a traditional folk reel. This then gives way to a powerful, driving, and triumphant rock section, where Barre unleashes one of his most soaring, lyrical, and emotionally charged guitar solos. The dynamic shift is dramatic, cinematic, and emotionally powerful. The final verses are delivered with a renewed sense of urgency and passion, as Anderson makes an impassioned, almost desperate plea to bring me a stallion, black as night, and to let the heavy horses run somewhere in my waking dreams. The song is a powerful and profound piece of social commentary, cleverly disguised as a folk epic. It is Jethro Tull at their most cinematic, their most heartfelt, and their most emotionally resonant. The arrangement is endlessly sophisticated, the musicianship is absolutely impeccable, and the lyrical theme is both timeless and deeply personally felt. Heavy Horses is not just a song, it is a symphony, a loving and dignified tribute to a lost way of life, and a powerful testament to Ian Anderson's unique ability to find profound, universal meaning in the seemingly mundane. It is a work of staggering beauty, intelligence, and power that deserves to be recognized as one of the great cornerstones of their long and distinguished career. The final album of the band's classic-era lineup, Stormwatch, 1979, was a noticeably darker, colder, and more foreboding affair. The pastoral themes were still present, but now they were tinged with a palpable sense of impending doom, a growing concern for environmental catastrophe, the insatiable greed of multinational oil companies, and a general sense of societal decay. The album is home to one of Ian Anderson's most haunting, desolate, and atmospheric acoustic pieces, the chilling Dun Ringil. This is a stark, solitary performance, just Anderson's voice and his nylon string acoustic guitar, reportedly recorded in his own home studio, which adds to the track's intimate, almost voyeuristic quality. The song is named after a ruined, windswept Iron Age fort on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and the music perfectly captures the feeling of ancient, crumbling stones, cold, crashing waves, and desolate, windswept landscapes. The guitar playing is utterly hypnotic. Anderson uses a repetitive, almost minimalist, arpeggiated finger-picking pattern in a dark minor key. The key to the song's profoundly unsettling atmosphere, however, is the timing. Anderson's vocal phrasing constantly pushes and pulls against the steady, metronomic rhythm of the guitar, creating a palpable sense of tension and unease. He seems to be rushing ahead of the beat, then deliberately lagging behind it, a technique known as rubato that gives the performance a raw, unstable, and almost improvisational feel. The melody itself is modal, drawing on the ancient scales of traditional Scottish and Irish folk music. The lyrics are dense with powerful, elemental imagery of nature's untamable power and the encroaching, insidious threat of the oily waters and the glint of steel. The production is stark, raw, and immediate. You can clearly hear the subtle squeak of his fingers on the fretboard, the sharp intake of his breath before he begins a line. It is an intensely personal and profoundly intimate recording. In an era of bloated stadium rock, studio excess, and disco fever, Dun Ringil was a brave, stark, and defiant statement. It was a powerful reminder that the most affecting and resonant music can often be the most simple. It showcased Anderson's singular prowess as a solo performer and his absolute mastery of mood and atmosphere. It is a chilling, beautiful, and profoundly moving piece of music, a hidden, windswept gem that reveals the solitary, poetic, and deeply troubled heart of Jethro Tull. The 1980s were a turbulent and often confusing time for Jethro Tull, as they were for many of the so-called dinosaur progressive rock bands of the 1970s. The musical landscape had shifted seismically. Punk and new wave had washed away the old guard, and complex, lengthy compositions were now viewed as the height of pretentious self-indulgence. Anderson, never one to stand still or wallow in nostalgia, chose to engage directly with the new technologies of the era, controversially incorporating synthesizers, sequencers, and drum machines into the band's established sound. This led to a series of albums that, to put it mildly, alienated a significant portion of their loyal fan base. The 1982 album The Broadsword and the Beast is perhaps the most successful and artistically satisfying synthesis of their classic organic sound with these new, colder electronic textures. While it contains some of the band's most accessible and radio-friendly material, it also features a track of immense power, drama, and complexity that is often overlooked. The magnificent Flying Colors. The song deals with the grim aftermath of a fallen king or a deposed leader, a recurring theme in Anderson's work of betrayal, faded glory, and the harsh realities of power. It opens with a stark, ominous synthesizer arpeggio from the band's new keyboardist, the young and technically gifted Peter John Vittisi. This is not the warm, swirling Hammond organ of the 70s. This is a cold, precise, digital sound that immediately sets a very different, more modern tone. The verse is driven by a powerful martial marching rhythm, with Martin Barre's guitar playing a heavy, distorted, and wonderfully chunky riff that still sounds quintessentially Tull. The chorus is where the song truly takes flight. It features a soaring, majestic, and anthemic vocal melody from Anderson, layered with rich cinematic synthesizer chords and powerful, cannon-like drumming from new member Jerry Conway. The structure of the song is wonderfully complex, with multiple, distinct sections and dramatic shifts in mood and dynamics. There is a beautiful, melancholic bridge section featuring a clean, chiming electric guitar melody and a more reflective, vulnerable vocal from Anderson. The instrumental break is a spectacular showcase for the new 80s-era Jethro Tull. It features a blistering, technically brilliant guitar solo from Barre, full of rapid-fire runs and dramatic string bends, followed by an equally impressive and virtuosic synthesizer solo from Vittisi, who proves himself to be a worthy successor to John Evan. The two trade phrases in a dynamic, exciting call and response that is both thrillingly modern and reminiscent of the classic guitar organ duels of 70s progressive rock. Flying Colors is a song that proves that Jethro Tull could adapt to a new and often hostile musical decade without sacrificing their core musical intelligence or their unique artistic identity. It is a powerful, dramatic, and brilliantly arranged piece of modern progressive rock that successfully integrates new sounds and technologies into their established framework. It deserves to be seriously re-evaluated by those who dismiss the band's 80s output out of hand as a creative wasteland. After the synth-heavy and critically lambasted Underwraps album in 1984, and a frightening 3-year hiatus forced upon the band by a serious and potentially career-ending throat ailment suffered by Anderson, Jethro Tull returned in 1987 with Crest of a Knave. This album, a deliberate return to a more guitar-oriented sound, won a surprise and highly controversial Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Metal Performance, famously beating out the expected winners, Metallica. While that album signaled a commercial comeback, it was the albums of the early 1990s that saw the band truly reclaim the adventurous spirit of their 70s glory days, albeit with a modern edge and the wisdom of experience. The 1991 album Catfish Rising is a raw, gritty, and heavily blues-inflected record, but it closes with a track that is anything but simple, 12-bar blues. Rocks on the Road is a magnificent 7-minute epic that feels like a powerful and poignant summation of the band's entire career up to that point. It possesses the acoustic intimacy of their finest folk material, the hard rock power and dynamic shifts of their classic 70s albums, and the mature lyrical concerns of a middle-aged Ian Anderson. The song is a deeply moving reflection on life, death, mortality, and the emotional and psychological baggage we all carry through life, using the powerful and evocative metaphor of a weary traveler on a long and difficult road. It begins with a delicate, wistful mandolin melody, played by Anderson, over a simple, clean acoustic guitar chord progression. The mood is quiet, autumnal, and deeply introspective. The first verse is sung in a gentle, world-weary voice, the voice of a man who has seen and experienced it all. The song then builds in a patient, masterful way that is classic Tool. The rhythm section enters with a slow, steady, and resolute groove. Martin Barre adds clean, beautifully arpeggiated electric guitar figures that add depth, color, and a sense of forward movement. As the song progresses, it gradually and inexorably gains intensity. The drums become more powerful and assertive, and Barre's guitar becomes more distorted and aggressive. The track features two distinct and brilliant instrumental sections. The first is a beautiful, lyrical, and heartfelt flute solo from Anderson, a moment of pure, unadorned melody that harks back to his most iconic classic 70s work. The second is a stunning, emotionally charged guitar solo from the ever-brilliant Martin Barre. It is not a flashy, high-speed look-at-me solo, but a true masterpiece of phrasing, taste, and emotional weight. He builds the solo with the skill of a master storyteller, starting with long, sustained, vocal-like notes and gradually increasing the complexity and intensity, perfectly mirroring the emotional arc of the song itself. Rocks on the Road is a mature, confident, and deeply moving piece of music. It shows that even after more than 2 decades of collaboration, the unique creative partnership between Ian Anderson and Martin Barre was still capable of producing music of extraordinary quality, depth, and emotional resonance. It is a song that richly rewards repeated listening, a complex, beautiful, and ultimately life-affirming work that stands shoulder to shoulder with the very best of their 70s output. Finally, we arrive at a piece that many devoted Tull aficionados consider to be one of their absolute finest, a slice of pure, unadulterated genius, yet it remains virtually unknown to the general public. From the strange and eclectic 1974 album War Child, the song Sea Lion is a perfect 3.5-minute encapsulation of the band's quirky, theatrical, and boundlessly adventurous musical spirit. The song is a bizarre, surreal, and allegorical tale, featuring anthropomorphic animals, a common lyrical device for Anderson, who often uses the animal kingdom to satirize human folly. But it is the utterly unique musical setting that makes this track so remarkable and so enduringly brilliant. The track is built around a jaunty, infectious, and almost carnivalesque piano riff from the classically trained John Evan, played in a staccato, percussive style that is pure, old-fashioned ragtime. The time signature is a playful, lilting 6/8, giving the song a waltz-like, delightfully off-kilter feel. The peerless rhythm section of Barrymore Barlow and Jeffrey Hammond is incredibly tight and inventive, navigating the song's quirky stop-start rhythms with breathtaking ease and swing. Barlow's drumming in particular is an absolute highlight, full of inventive, melodic fills, and clever, unexpected cymbal work. Martin Barre's guitar, for once, plays a secondary role for much of the song, providing crunchy, rhythmic power chords that add weight and muscle to the sound without ever getting in the way of the piano's dominance. The song's structure is delightfully eccentric and unpredictable. It shifts constantly between the main piano-driven verse and a heavier, more dramatic, and gloriously over-the-top chorus. The vocal melody is one of Anderson's most memorable and agile, full of unexpected twists and turns that perfectly follow the surreal narrative of the lyrics. The instrumental section is pure, unadulterated, joyous progressive rock. It features a fantastic saxophone-like growling flute solo from Anderson, followed by a short, sharp, and brilliantly constructed guitar solo from Barre that is a model of melodic economy. The song also features a full, lush orchestral arrangement by D. Palmer, which adds a layer of mock grandeur and cinematic sweep to the wonderfully silly proceedings. Sea Lion is Jethro Tull at their most playful, their most eccentric, and their most brilliantly imaginative. It is a song that is positively bursting at the seams with musical ideas, a miniature rock opera packed into 3.5 exhilarating minutes. It is complex, it is funny, and it is impossibly, maddeningly catchy. It is the kind of song that no other band on the face of the earth could have written or performed. It is a glorious testament to their unique chemistry, their formidable musical chops, and their fearless, unbridled creativity. It is a song for the true fan, a secret handshake, a rich reward for those who are willing to look beyond the obvious, stadium-shaking hits and explore the rich, strange, and wonderful world that lies within the deep grooves of their albums. So we return at last to the initial impertinent question. Do you understand Jethro Tull now? Perhaps not completely, for their vast and varied catalog is a dense, sprawling, and often contradictory landscape that would take a lifetime of dedicated listening to fully chart. But what these 10 carefully chosen songs demonstrate, beyond any shadow of a doubt, is that the popular, comfortable perception of this band is a woefully, insultingly inadequate caricature. They were not just a man with a flute. They were a formidable collective of brilliant, iconoclastic, and fiercely innovative musicians who consistently and bravely pushed at the established boundaries of rock music for over 5 decades. They were masters of rhythm, melody, harmony, and arrangement. They were fearless pioneers who seamlessly and uniquely blended folk, blues, classical, jazz, and hard rock into a sound that was, and remains, entirely their own. To know Jethro Tull only through Aqualung or Locomotive Breath is to have read the lurid cover of a great and complex novel, but never to have bothered to turn a single challenging page. The real story, the one filled with true musical genius, profound lyrical depth, and fearless, often reckless experimentation, lies waiting for anyone with the courage and the curiosity to actually listen. The postcard is fine for the casual tourist, but the true, life-changing adventure begins when you leave the safety of the shore and dive, without reservation, headfirst into the deep. The journey is demanding. It requires your full attention. But the rewards are, I assure you, immeasurable. Now go and listen. Really listen.